Good morning, class. Welcome back to this session of modern organization and management. In our earlier session, we discussed regarding the meaning, importance, limitation, and future of control and controlling. In this session, we shall continue with the process of control. So, we were discussing that there are four steps, and the first step we already discussed. So, continuing with this, the second step is with regarding to measurement of actual performance. So, here the main thing is to continue with this step, the actual performance has to happen in the organization, and the actual performance of the employees is usually measured against the standard which has been fixed for that particular job. And the one thing that should always be kept in mind is that now this task of measuring should compulsorily be done in objective manner, and there is no room for any kind of subjectivity. Now, where standards are expressed in numeral terms, measurement will not create problem. That is to tell, performance of a worker in terms of units produced in a week can be easily measured against the standard output of that particular week. On the other hand, measuring the performance of a personal manager is not easy, where standards cannot be set in precise terms. Now we have to see indirect measures such as number of strikes organized during his tenure, say maybe 5 years, or man days lost during his, the manager's period, etc. Now, speaking in general, measurement of performance is way more difficult at the higher levels of management than the lower levels. Now, speaking or coming to the technique of measurement, measurement can be done directly through personal observation or indirectly through regular reports. Now, these reports they can be oral or they can be written. Now, the personal observation usually gives first-hand and intimate knowledge of the actual operations, functions, or what we call as activity. Now, the information can never be filtered through others. Personal observation is a very good method because it can pick up omissions, facial expression, and also tone of voice that may be missed by other sources. However, this personal observation, there are chances that it is subject to personal bias. That is to tell, what one manager says, another manager may not be able to see. And moreover, it is time consuming and you know and obtrusive also. And also it develops a sense of insecurity in subordinates with regard maybe such that the manager is not having confidence in them. And if you see the trend in the recent days, statistical reports are widely used by managers in order to measure performance. Now, these statistical reports it includes computer printouts, graphs, chart, bar chart, and numerical display of any form, and also acquisition of information through uh, things such as conference, meetings, or one to one conversation, or over phone. This shows the example of oral reports. Now, but then the main limitation of this method is that there is problem of documenting the information for future references. Now, manager during the measurement phase must be in a position to express all the jobs and activities in tangible and measurable terms. Of course, when the performance indicator cannot be stated in quantitative terms, then the manager can use subjective criteria. Now, any analysis or decision made based on subjective criteria should recognize the limitation of subjectiveness. Now, this is the case in the business organization. And we can also take the large scale units. Now, when it is a large business organization, checking all items produced is never a easy task. Now, in such cases, managers usually pick certain items at random and check the pace of work. To check performance at higher levels, managers concentrate on key or strategic points only. The performance is measured usually at periodical intervals, maybe weekly report, monthly report, quarterly, or yearly. And there is an advantage of this is that it does not upset the routine way of work in the organization. Now, speaking about this checking process. Now, to make this checking process effective, it is, you know, it has been suggested that a manager has to concentrate on three key aspects, that is, completeness, objectivity, and responsiveness. So, what are these? Or why does a manager has to concentrate on these three things so that controlling becomes effective? Now, let us take the first one, that is completeness. Now, what are we trying to define here? Now, completeness refers to that a complete measures provide an opportunity for the manager to concentrate on all aspects of the job instead of neglecting unmeasured tasks in favor of measured ones. The next one is objectivity. What is objectivity here? This objective measure, it avoids the risk of bias and also thereby avoids resentment, which are inherent in the subjective assessment of both tasks and people. Now, the last one is responsiveness. Now, responsive measure, it supports the belief that effort and performance lead to improvement in the system of control. So, these three types of measurements are equally important for all jobs in business organization. So the next question is when to measure. Now, if we normally see, it is a matter of general principle that measurement and also evaluation is done once the task is completed. But then there are some of the instances where measurement of work can be done even along with the performance or during the performance, and there are also chances that certain adjustments are made in case of production of certain commodities. Sometimes performance may be checked on the completion of each phase in the production, and if at all the case is such that it belongs to assembling task, each parts can be checked before assembling. And whenever it is not possible to measure performance before the work is completed, then definitely the measurement shall be done once after accomplishing the task. Now, even when measurement during the performance is possible, there are also chances that the management may not practice it because of the cost which is incurred in doing so. Now, cost becomes one of the important variables affecting measurement during performance. If cost incurred is not much and time consumed is also ignorable, then measurement during the work is always advisable. So, what we can tell is that between standards and performance, there always exists feedback along with the measurement and the adjustment of the work. I shall repeat it once again. Between standards and the work performed, there exists feedback along with the measurement and adjustment of the work. Now, moving further towards the third step, now anything after this is very easy. It is comparison of actual performance with the standard. Now, what happens when we compare the actual with the standards? Now, this is the point where it speaks of degree of variation between actual performance and the standards. Now, some variations in performance can always be expected in all activities, and it is therefore important to determine the acceptable range of variation. Now, deviations in excess of this range become significant and receive managers' attention. Now, all such deviations may be due to errors in planning. Now, defective implementation or careless performance of the operators. And as a matter of fact, only major or exceptional deviations should be communicated to top management in form of reports. And this is what we call as management by exception. So, with the third step, remember this word management by exception. What does this mean? Now, this means that in doing certain activity, normally there shall be a deviation, but then some deviations are always accepted. There shall be a degree of variation up until a certain level within which it is acceptable. And such deviations need not be reported to the top level management because all such things involves time and effort, and the general tendency is that the top level management will not be having time for minor tasks of the organization. So any exception, any deviation that is beyond a certain degree should only be reported to the top level management, where their opinion also matters. That is what we call as management by exception. And the last step in the control process is taking corrective actions. Remember, the last step definitely is taking corrective actions, but then it should never be forgotten that take corrective steps only where it is necessary. Now, if the task is done correctly, of course, there is nothing to correct. Only where the activities derails from the track, there you will have to take corrective actions. Now, corrective steps are initiated by managers with a view to rectify the defects in the actual performance. Now, if actual performance, to give an example, if it falls short of standards, maybe due to non-availability of materials, managers might try to procure these materials and thus he might set things in order. Now, if it is due to poor results shown by employees, it could be rectified through the introduction of attractive incentive plans. So, thus, a corrective action may involve a change in method, rules, procedures, and so on. Sometimes variations might occur due to an unrealistic standard. So, that is the goal, maybe too high or too low. In such cases, managers try to set things in order by revising the standards altogether. Now, we spoke from a long time regarding corrective action. But then this corrective action is never an easy task. It might include change in the strategy itself. It might include change in structure or compensation practice or training programs, or it might also include changes in redesigning of job, maybe replacement of personnel or re-establishment of budgets or standards. Now these corrective action, they may be immediate or they can also be basic. Now when we tell basic, it is nothing but the structural or the foundation of a certain activity might have to altogether be changed. Now, immediate actions or immediate corrective actions corrects something right now but gets things back on track. So, this is therefore temporary in nature. And when we speak of basic corrective action, it is concerned with permanent solution to the problem of a serious deviation. Now, this is where it is suggested that a manager should never mind revising the standard when the standard is set at an unreasonably low or high level. High standards pose insurmountable problems to operators, and it can also breed discontentment and frustration from the side of employees. And of this frustration, this contentment, there are chances that it will lead to certain other serious problems in the organization. Now, that is the case when the standards are set at a very high rate. Now, if at all the standards are set low, then it will make employees docile and unproductive. It is when a particular important project in a company is running behind schedule, corrective action might include, things such as overtime may be permitted, additional workers and equipment may be assigned, a full time director may be assigned to personally push the project through. And if these actions fail, the schedule may have to be revised. But then, if most of the projects in the company are usually behind the schedule, and even more serious type of basic corrective action may be demanded. So the need for a drastic overhaul of control process and recognition of the company may be required in such case. So this is regarding the control process. Now this is how control process is. So the next question comes, how to make control effective? Is there any necessary that the controlling itself has to be made effective? So these are some of the characteristics of effective controlling system or effective control system. The first one is, and definitely it is, that it has to be suitable. Suitable with whom or what? Now it is not that what control system works for one business organization would be working in the same effective way for another organization. Now, each organization shall be different from the other in terms of how it operates. Therefore, the control system must be suitable to the needs of an organization. Now, it must conform to the nature and needs of the job and the area to be controlled. That is to tell, the control system used in production department shall be different from that is used in the sales department. So not only that, what system work for one business organization shall be applicable to the other, but within the organization itself, what works for one department may not be suitable for another department. The next thing is that a controlling system should be simple in nature. Now, the control system should be easy to understand and operate. A complicated control system will always cause unnecessary mistake. There are chances that it can cause confusion. There are chances that it can create because of this frustration among employees. Now, when the control system could be understood properly by the employees, employees can interrupt the same in a right way and ensure a correct implementation of this. Okay. Now the next characteristic is that it is said that for a control system to be effective, it should be selective in nature. But how can a control system be selective? Or regarding what it has to be selective? Here they are trying to tell that to be useful, the control system must focus on putting all its focus, attention on key result area or what we call as strategic area or what we call as important factors. which are critical to the organization performance. Now, there can be some insignificant deviations. Now, these insignificant deviations, they need not be looked into. Now, by concentrating attention on important aspects, managers can save their time and would be able to meet problems head on in a effective manner. Now, definitely, the next one calls for a system being sound in working and economical on cost wise. Now, the system of control should be economical and also easy to maintain. Now, any system of control has to justify the benefit that it gives in relation to the cost it incurs. Now, to minimize cost, management should try to impose the least amount of control that is necessary to produce the desired result. The next one is the control system has to be flexible in nature. Now, this is one of the basic characteristic that is necessary because the business environment is ever changing and also it is full of supersonic changes. Now, in terms of competitiveness, technologies, and also other environmental changes, force organization to change their plans. And as a result, control should be necessarily flexible. It must be flexible enough to adjust to adverse changes or to take advantage of new opportunities. Next one is that it has to be forward looking in nature. Now, an effective control system should be forward looking. It, it must be able to provide timely information, especially on deviation. Now, any departure from the standard should be caught as soon as possible. Now, this shall help manager to take remedial steps immediately before things go out of control. The next one is reasonable. So, what has to be reasonable in a control system? Now, in a control system, control itself must be reasonable. In the sense, they must be something which is attainable. Now, if they are too high or unreasonable, they can no longer motivate people in the organization. On the other hand, when controls are set under low levels, they do not pose any challenge to employees. Now, they do not stretch their talents. Therefore, control standards should be reasonable. They should challenge and stretch people to reach higher performance without being demotivated. The next one is a responsibility for failures. Now, an effective control system, it should always indicate the reasons for or the responsibility for failures. Now, detecting deviations shall be meaningless unless one knows where in the organization they are occurring and who is responsible for this, or what is responsible for this particular thing that is happening. So, the control system should also point out what corrective actions are needed to keep actual performance in line with those of planned performances. The next one is acceptable. This speaks that controls will not work unless people want them to. They should be acceptable to those to whom they apply. That is, controls will be acceptable when they can be quantifiable, when they are objective in nature, when they are attainable in action, and also when it is understood by one and all in the business organization. And one more thing that it speaks of is objective. This tells that a control system would be effective only when it is objective and impersonal in nature. Now, it should not be subjective and arbitrary in nature. When standards are set in clear terms, it is easy to evaluate performance. Not only that, any vague standards can never be easily understood and therefore they are not achieved in a right way. So, control should be accurate and also unbiased. Now, if they are unreliable and subjective, people shall definitely resent them. So, this is about how our effective control system should be. Now, the next topic is with regard to the different types of control. Normally, speaking about these types of control, it is divided into three. That is feedback control, or what we call as historical control or post control. The next one is concurrent control, and the third one we have is feed forward control. Now, what are these three? Or on what basis have it been divided into these three types? Now, this classification of control has been made on the basis of time at which control is applied. The first one is feedback control or historical control or post control. Now, here it is the process of gathering information about activities which have been completed in the organization. Once after it has been completed, evaluation and information is collected and steps are taken to improve same kind of activities in the future. Now, feedback control, it enables managers to use information on the past performance to bring future performance in accordance with the line what has been planned objectively. Now, this feedback control has some critics for it. Now, the critics of feedback control argue that it is like closing the gate after the horse is gone, because corrective action is taken after the fact and costs tend to pile up quickly while problems and deviation exist. But on the positive side, feedback control tests the quality and also validity of standards. Standards that prove impossible to reach should be made more reasonable. And those standards which prove too easy, they need to be made tough. So if feedback control has to be said in a sentence, it is a post-mortem examination of events, the purpose of which is to improve performance in future. So this feedback or post-action control system, uh, it measures results from a completed action, the cause of deviation from the standards that are determined, and corrective steps are taken so that such deviations do not occur again. Now, if we see in all physical and biological system, some message is transmitted in form of mechanical transfer of energy. Now, it could be a chemical reaction or any other means which is known as cybernetics. Now, in social system also, some information is sent back to exercise control. Now, any good managerial system control itself by information feedback, which discloses errors in accomplishing goals and initiates corrective action. Now, this feedback is the process of adjusting future action based upon information about past performance. Now, though feedback is after the fact, it is still vital to the control process. Sometimes input variables are unmeasurable. Now, some variables such as values an employee brings to the job is not measurable. And also there are variables which are not detected at the feed forward control point. Therefore, feedback is necessary in any continuous activity as it enables to take corrective action which is essential for the accomplishment of goals of a system. Now, this concept of feedback is important to the development of an effective control system in any organization. Now, manager control is somewhat akin to the thermostat system of a refrigerator, as we discussed earlier. Now, thermostat, uh, if you do not know what it is, now thermostat is a control device of closed loop type and makes control instantaneous. Now, in a refrigerator, thermostat records the actual temperature inside the refrigerator, compares it with the required temperature, and it instantly initiates action to bring the actual temperature to what is required. So that is how thermostats work in refrigerator. Similarly, in an organization, the management needs continuous flow of information about actual performance so that deviations are promptly corrected. Now, information which the management receives is nothing but feedback. So, feedback information may be received formally, it can be received informally. Formal feedback involves all written information about actual performance, reports, financial statements, etc. But whereas informal feedback is through personal observation, personal context, and also informal discussion. Now, managerial control, it cannot be, very much instantaneous or self-correcting as thermostat system that we spoke of or any other kind of mechanical or electrical system, because there always exists a time lag between recording deviation and taking actions in the management. Even when very much sophisticated system of data collection are used, so the collected information needs to be analyzed properly before suggesting any corrective action. The next one is concurrent control. Now, feedback control, you know what happens when work is completed and we take corrective steps. What are the advantages? What are the limitations? And how feedback is one of the important facts in the feedback control. And how the example of how thermostat works, or why is it necessary to have control. Now, speaking about concurrent control, it has also got its name to be a real time control or steering control. Now, as the name suggests, it provides for taking corrective actions or to make any kind of adjustments while program is still in operation and before any major damage is done. See, concurrent controls are also, as we said, can be called as steering control. Now, the navigator of an aircraft who adjusts the aircraft movement is the best example of concurrent control. Or when you ride bicycle, you must adjust your steering constantly depending upon the turns in the road or the obstacles or changes in terrain to keep your bicycle upright and move towards the destination. So these are the example of concurrent control. Now we can also take the navigator of a ship. It adjusts its movement continuously, or the driver of the car adjusts the steering continuously depending upon the direction of the destination. Now, when we speak of business, control chart is an example of concurrent control. Safety check can be another illustration with this regard. And the main thing is that concurrent control occurs while an activity is still taking in place. The next thing we have is feed forward control. Now, feed forward control can also be called as predictive control, or it can also be called as pre-action control. So it can be predictive control, pre-action control, or feed forward control. Here, as the name suggests, the control system anticipate problems that the management might encounter in the future. So it involves evaluation of inputs and taking corrective measures before a particular sequence of operation is completed. It is based on the timely and also accurate information about changes in the environment. of business. Now, if right information is not available in time, feed forward control is likely to be imperfect. Now, feed forward follows the simple principle that an organization is not stronger than its weakest link. Now, for example, if a machine is not functioning properly, then the one who operates the machine will look for certain components to see whether they are working well or not. Now, the same logic applies to feed forward control. Or, in other words, when you are driving in a car, if the car suddenly stops, then there are chances that you get down and check the important things, maybe whether the tire has been punctured or and the rest important things. And the same thing or the same logic applies in feed forward control. Now, it is essential to determine and monitor the critical inputs into any operating system. The preventive maintenance program is an important example of feed forward control. Now, it is employed to prevent a breakdown of machinery. Now, another example can be given of formulation of policies to prevent critical problems from occurrence. Or a policy on absenteeism may be communicated to new employees to help prevent potential problems that occur due to absenteeism. Now, speaking of all this, cash budget is also an example of feed forward control, where the finance manager is in a position to estimate the cash flow for the coming year. Now, if there is a shortage of funds in particular month, he can arrange for bank loan or some other alternative. Now, this predictive control is frequently termed as feed forward control. It attempts to anticipate problems or deviation from the standards in advance of their occurrence. So it is more aggressive, proactive approach to control and also allows corrective action to be taken ahead of the occurrence of the problem. Now, one notable characteristic of feed forward control is that it anticipates problems and permits action to be taken before the problem occurs. Now, this feedback control, it can be used with more advantage if it is such that a thorough planning and analysis is done. If it is it can carefully discrimination should be applied in selecting input variables. And also data on input variables must be regularly collected and assessed. And this feed forward control system, it must be kept dynamic in nature. And also corrective actions must be taken according to the feedback control. And under all these things, feed forward control becomes very much advantageous for the business organization. So if feed forward control has to be said in one simple sentence, it is the intelligent anticipation of problems and their timely prevention rather than after the fact reaction. Now, there are some requirements for this feed forward control, and these requirements it has been given by Nutz. Okay, he tells that first one is you should make a thorough and careful analysis of the planning and also controlling system and identify the most important input variables. First, it has to be done. Second, that there should be a model developed of the control system. And once after a model is developed, he suggests that uh, care should be taken to keep the model up to date, or in other words, the model should be reviewed regularly to see whether the input variables are identified and their interrelationships continue to represent realities. Um, Once after it is done, it is the next step is to collect data on input variables regularly, and it should be put into the system. Once after that, a regularly assessment of the variations of actual input and also data from planned for inputs and evaluate the impact on expected end results. Lastly, take action. Like any other techniques of planning and control, all that the system can do is indicate problems, and people must obviously take action to solve them. So it's been one again 50 long minutes of listening. You might there are chances that you might be bored. So our last session we discussed regarding the steps of control, the characteristics of effective control, and types of control system. In our this session, we shall see the next topic, that is dimension of control. Oh, now what is this dimension of control? Now, how things work out in a small business organization and how it works out in a large business organization is entirely two different things. Now, when we speak about a large multi product and multi plant, multi location organization, definitely it is not possible to check each and everything and to initiate timely remedial steps whenever things go off the track. And therefore, managers should focus attention on only key or critical areas which have a significant impact on the performance of various departments in an organization. And in doing so, these steps are found to be of very much relevance. That is, first one regarding the key result area is critical or strategic point control. This tells that it is neither economic or nor easy to check each and every operation in an organization, and control for it to be effective should always be focused on key result areas which are critical to the success of an enterprise. So, management, while reviewing standards, must pick some strategic points that reflect the entire organization. The strategic points are so important that if anything goes wrong there, the entire organization suffers almost instantaneously. And therefore, managers, as a rule, should focus attention on deviation at strategic points only. And this will help them in setting things right without loss of either time, either loss of energy, or even loss of any kind of resource. So if a critical or strategic point has to be defined, such strategic point control, it puts emphasis on measuring performance and checking deviation in respect of key result areas which are highly critical to the success of a firm. So, there are some of the important features of this strategic points which can be seen. The first one is a central point is established for every key operation or activity or event in the business. That is to tell, if we take an example, in a factory, timekeeper should check, timekeeper you know, should check the time of workers' entry into the factory. The timekeeper is usually placed at the very gate of the factory, and as far as punctuality is concerned, the gate is the strategic and central point. Similarly, in a manufacturing firm, quality control department is the central point to determine the efficiency of output. Now, these central points, they must be comprehensive and economical. Now, they are comprehensive in the sense that they include all sub operations in the operation. Economy is also sought because each and every item produced need not be checked or verified. And checking strategic points brings economy all together in the business. And strategic points are generally balanced in the sense that equal importance is given to both qualitative and quantitative factors. For example, marketing and personnel should receive equal weight in setting standards, and in essence, standard must also be set for staff experts along with the line managers. The next one is management by expectation or MBE. Now, according to this particular principle, it tells that managers should give more attention to unusual or exceptional items. Only important deviations from established standards should be brought to the attention of management. Now, if the actual performance is within an acceptable range of deviation from the standard, it need not be reported to the management as no remedial action is required. But then, in case of a major deviation from the standard, the matter has to receive the immediate attention of the management on priority basis. The principle highlights the importance of the statement that if you want to control everything, you end up controlling nothing. So better focus on key deviations and leave the minor ones to be taken care at lower levels. Now, speaking about this MBE, the importance of MBE, it stems from the enormous size of business and the consequences of complexity in operation. Now, MBE is a very effective approach in controlling the modern organization. Now, MBE should not be mistaken as management by crisis. Now, if MBE slips into management by crisis, then disastrous results follow organization heads for breakdown in control and planning. So, now we can discuss What are the benefits of this MBA? First one is it definitely saves time. It identifies which are the critical problem areas. It also stimulates communication. It reduces the frequency of decision making. And also it leads to concentration of effort on important things. Now it makes use of more knowledge and also data. Now it is necessary, very much necessary in big organization. Now the two principle that we spoke, that is critical or strategic point control and management by exception. Now both this principle it stresses the same thing. That is the top management must focus on the important issue and leave the routine things to the people at lower level. But then there is difference. Now the difference between the two principle is somewhat subtle in nature. That is, in critical point control, the manager concentrates his attention on strategic or key activities, but in exception principle, the manager is chiefly concerned with deviation regardless of the fact where they occur. Okay. Now controlling it has effects, all such things are definitely yes, but then there is always something called as a resistance to control in the large business organization. Now this resistance is one of the natural outcomes to control, because control tends to take away certain amount of individual freedom, and employees usually tend to view control in a negative way rather than a positive tool. And these points that has been given here as a resistance to control is taken from a research work of Mondi et al. And it is, once again, the list is not exhaustive. You refer different textbook, you can get more. But this particular has been taken from the work of Mondi et al. The first one is with regard to over control. Now there are chances that at times organization try to control too many things concerning employee behavior. That is maybe as to when to report, where to park the vehicle, when to have morning coffee, when to leave for the day, how to process the works, and so on. Now, when employees perceive these as unreasonable and acceptable or unacceptable, that is when trouble begins to surface every now and then in the organization. The next one is inappropriate control. Now, often controls are not related to the objectives of the organization. Now, if the wrong thing is being controlled, this will not contribute to doing the right thing efficiently. Then is the unachievable standard. Now, unattainable standard often produce negative reaction from employees. Now, they may quit the company in frustration, and if their complaints in this regard are not resolved to their satisfaction. Not only that, unpredictable standards also come in the way of effective control. Now, when the control system is unpredictable or which cannot be, you know, guessed, and when standard is constantly changed, frustration and resentment of the control process can result. And for instance, if a production manager is asked to achieve maximum output, and once the output level has been achieved, he is told that quality is more important, frustration is likely to result. Next one is rewards for inefficiency. Now, there is one of the management researcher called as Griffin. Now, he has given an interesting example with regard to this argument. Now, imagine two operating departments which are approaching the end of financial year. There is Department A and there is Department B. Now, Department A expects to have rupees 10,000 of its budget left over, while Department B is already rupees 15,000 in red. That is to tell, it has used 15,000 more than what the budget speaks of. And as a result, Department A is likely to have its budget cut for the next year. And Department B is likely to get budget increase. This is called as reward for inefficiency. Or that now this year maybe for both the department the budget might be 2 lakh. Now since Department A has 10,000 left over, next year in the budget they might get only 1,90,000, telling they had money left, so they obviously got too much to begin with. While the Department B, compared to this year, in the next year budget they might get 2,15,000, telling they obviously have not been getting enough money. Thus, Department A is punished for being efficient and Department B is rewarded for being inefficient. And not surprisingly, most public sectors in the country commonly hasten to deplete their budget as the end of the year approaches. People thus resist the intent of this control and behave in ways that run counter to the organization's intent. And there are some uncontrollable variables. And it is really frustrating to be, reprimanded for something that cannot be controlled. Suppose a manager is told that he will be evaluated on the basis of the profit or loss of his division, but he does not have the authority to hire and fire employees. Situations like this can harm entire control system, and it might compel people to revolt against the whole process of controlling. Now, speaking of all this, we can speak of areas of control, or where does this controlling in a business organization actually occurs. Now, it is very difficult to speak about a precise list of areas where control should be exercised. However, it can be safely suggested that an activity that affects the survival and growth of the organization should be taken as the critical area of control and dealt with effectively. Now, according to Peter F. Drucker, there are 8 key result areas where objectives should be set and control should be exercised. They are marketing, first one being marketing, This list is given by Peter F. Drucker as to which are the areas where controlling is effective. The first one is marketing, the second one is innovation, the third one is productivity, the fourth one is human organization, the fifth one is financial resources, the sixth is physical resources, the seventh is profitability, and the eighth is social responsibilities. I'll repeat the list once again. The first is marketing, the second is innovation, the third is productivity, the fourth is human organization, the fifth is financial resource, the sixth is physical resource, the seventh is profitability, and eighth is social responsibility. Now, this was given by Peter F. Drucker, whereas one more management researcher, Holden, and some of his fellow colleagues, they have identified there are some 13 areas where control should be exercised. And this list is given by Holden and his fellow workers and some others. According to them, there are 13 areas. The first one being policies. The second one is organization. The third is personnel. That is PERSONNEL. The fourth is wages and salaries. The fifth is cost. The sixth is method and manpower. The seventh one is capital expenditure. The eighth one is service department efforts. The ninth one is line of products. The 10th one is research and development. The 11th one is foreign operations. The 12th one is external relations. And the 13th one is overall control. So these are the 13 things that has been suggested by Holden and others. Now speaking about the next topic, it is yes, controlling should be present and definitely there shall be some kind of a resistance over the controller. But then how to overcome this resistance to control? The first one is definitely employee participation. That is, when it tells that when employees are involved with planning and also implementing the control, definitely they are or comparatively they less likely to resist it. Next one is justifiable controls. It tells that a control system will have greater acceptability if the reason for the control appears justifiable to those who must comply with it. That is, the firm may have to increase quality of product in order to obtain future contracts. In a way, this means not only increased profit for the firm but job stability for the employees also. The next one is precise and understandable standards. This tells that if employees know clearly what is expected of them, then definitely, comparatively, they exhibit less resistance. Any kind of unclear specification, any kind of vague standards usually put employees under a lot of strain, lot of stress, as they will not be knowing whether they have produced as per the norms or not. So, always precise and understandable standards should be present in the organization. The next one is realistic standards. This tells that controls that are established at very high levels with the view to harness employees are likely to be resisted with a lot of force. So, standards must be present, but then standards should be such that which should be very well challenging, but then which can be achievable. Next one speaks about timely communication of findings. It tells that for any control system to be effective, any kind of information, especially information regarding deviation, should be communicated to employees as quickly as possible. It tells that it is no use telling employees that their performance was below standard before 3 weeks. Now, if a problem is to be corrected, it must receive timely attention. The next one is accurate findings. Now this tells that the control system must provide accurate information about whether things have gone wrong, and if things have gone wrong, why. Now if information feedback has provided incorrect in the past, employees may not trust the control system. The next one is assuring support. Now, the control system must always focus attention on improving behavior and future performance of employees. It should not be used as a fault finding mission. Now, unfair circumstances should be avoided as much as possible, and also the workers of the organization should be assured that some occasional mistakes are not going to be punished in a mechanical way. Such support will always reduce the resistance from the side of employees. And last but not the least, it is with regard to the reinforcement. It speaks that all the employees who comply with the control system should be encouraged to exceed the targets through maybe rewards such as praise in their salary, some kind of recognition in the organization, or monetary benefit, or promotion to the next grade. Now, in the course of time, this would happen or this would help in enlisting the support of those who are initially quite reluctant to fall in the line and abide by the system. So this is with regarding to overcoming resistance to control.